Oh hey, didn't see you there. You caught me looking at a book. I've been reading this thing for about 15 years now, trying to find the perfect name for my pet wombat. And, by law, you can't name a wombat anything that already exists. Luckily, the contents of the book have expired recently because people just keep naming their things even weirder shit like Northwest, or no matter how I look at it, it's you guys' fault I'm not popular.
Anime titles. The title of any source of media is a well thought out binder to the themes, philosophies, and story behind the author's intent.
Wow! It really is about an author's chair.
When it comes to anime titles, there's a certain culture that reads with it coming into the circle your first go around. Plenty of shows sound fairly standard, but then you have names like, is it wrong to try to pick up girls in a dungeon?
Now that sounds ridiculous at first, but trust me, that's near the top of the weird anime title iceberg.
The precursor to a good anime title is to not show all your cards at once, or to completely show all your cards at once. Essentially, it's pretty random and at the whims of the author's discretion. A good test to see how effective your title is to see how much you can gauge of the story from the title alone. For example, what is this show about?
Okay, well, it's a name, so I assume it's about Naruto.
What about this one?
Well, the title's a pretty depressing sentence, so I suppose it's about a very sad reality.
And this one?
It's about monsters in pockets? Is it hentai?
You know, you're not too far off. The simplicity or complexity of a title, I think, really lies in what it can tell you with that amount of information. It's not just a situation where the title is good or bad, it's a case-by-case basis where the title is either straightforward or more elusive, short and sweet or long like a light novel, and even in times where it's very matter-of-fact or a bit more clever and silly. As it goes, it's a source of engagement towards what it means for and to the story it takes up on. To me, shows with title characters give off a sense of being character-centric, that the stories would be more personal and grounded to the perspective that would surround said character, be it of the actual main character or of those around them. Naruto, Sailor Moon, Komi Can't Communicate. It doesn't even have to include names, a reference to the subject or subjects does just fine. The quintessential quintuplets, the rising of the shield hero, One Punch Man. As long as there's some weight or intrigue that can be drawn from how the title character relays the title's prose, how the story plays out surrounding its namesake can make for fairly memorable character-driven ideas.
The way I see it, the titles that straight up tell you who you gotta focus on are often the simplest. That by no means indicate that they're lazy, it's just that there's someone in particular that you gotta be focusing on a lot. Unless, of course, you're JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, in which case you gotta be focusing on a whole flippin' metrosexual dynasty.
Anime that do this tend to be pretty straightforward. Again, aside from JoJo.
There's nothing straight or forward about this show.
Some shows like Princess Tutu or Prince of Tennis pose more on the emotional attachments and passions seen in the perspectives of its title characters, thus engaging in heartfelt and more connective ideas to the meanings and sharing title with the personage. Then there are others with more fantastical elements or bigger stakes, like A Certain Scientific Railgun, Mob Psycho 100, or Detective Conan, where the personalities of the title characters are just as big or energized to keep the intrigue and the plot revolving. This helps supplement the development of the characters as well as live up to why they're the central vantage point for the audience.
Take a show like Space Dandy for example. He's a dandy guy, in space. For as insane and weird as that show is, there is a certain elevation with it with Dandy at the helm. He's a larger-than-life playboy alien hunter whose overall eccentricities complement the psychedelic sci-fi nature of the show. And with a title like Space Dandy, doesn't that just exude a creative amount of comedic genius and imagery? It's like if you call the show Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Doesn't that just sound fun and weird and overall just pretty wild? Actually, that's good. I wonder if it's already taken.
The focal point of these titles is to bring attention to the character in question, and it helps the audience take a closer interest in said name on the screen, if not just a bit. Whether if it's a smaller, contained anime like Honda-kun or an out there bombastic joyride like Panty and Stocking, the one thing you can take from this is that titles of characters are very egocentric.
I mean, really, name me a show after yourself or through your own perspective. narcissistic much.
In a similar fashion, I think allusions to groups of people or organizations work as well. Something like Fairy Tail not only plays on the common phrase, but ties in with the magical aspect of the series as well as the literal guild the cast is a part of. Shows named for their respective clubs like Ouran High School Host Club or Genshiken bring a lighter commonality of likes and passions between characters, while shows named after families spotlight, well, families, and the dynamic they may share, and so on and so forth.
For example, Joshiraku or Rakugo Girls is a simple, light name that stews in the comedic imagery of Rakugo, Gremlin Girls, and the absurd possibilities that both of those elements could reach. It's like if you took modern day Disney heroines, put them all together in an improv group, and named it Lutz, Molly, and Do Stuff. That's just a gold mine waiting to happen, right?
When anime is not shoving people down your throat, phrasing, there's always the reliable MacGuffin titles. These are shows named after objects or goals, physical or otherwise. The most famous ones are arguably Dragon Ball and One Piece. These shows certainly have character-central tales and go through a lot during their course, like dying and not dying, some exceptions. But in general, MacGuffin titles don't necessarily draw you in plainly. Just imagine hearing the name One Piece for the first time without explanation. When you think of a swimsuit or that one last slice of pizza, maybe that's the One Piece. No, with MacGuffin titles, they aren't really there to grab a hold of your attention at first glance, but rather connected to the grander story to be had. These are goal-oriented motivations or reasons that tie the general cast together under a similar aim.
The thing about MacGuffin titles is that the namesake isn't always going to be physical or even real. As long as the end goal is there, the general idea still stands. The show is about the objective or the philosophies and do with. It just so happens that an audience is gained through other means. This is why something like Love Live fits the criteria as much as Death Note. Boy, wouldn't that be a crossover.
In terms of being titles, they're more of a slow burn kind of deal, where the realization of the meaning is introduced later on instead of as a first impression basis. But in doing so, the meaning holds as much significance as it tallies together as a means to unfold a series of events or develop character through said meaning.
While they typically aren't as eye-catching as some of the other titles, there is sort of an assured genius with them. Like, the author's just so sure of the story that it speaks for itself, and the title's really there as more of a foundation for it. I mean, if you can make a title like Heavy Object, which is a very generic phrase, sound appealing in retrospect, then maybe you're doing something right. I mean, I mostly watch it for the Technodrome. I don't know what a Technodrome is, but it sounds cool enough to fight adolescent radioactive shinobi amphibians, right? Man, what a long-winded, ridiculous sentence, huh?
Speaking of long-winded, aside from my existence, light novel titles. Or rather, that's what I call this category. Light novel titles are infamous for being anything but light. On the contrary, they're quite long and very meticulous in squeezing in just about any odd detail they can. And it makes sense. In an ever-growing industry of constant competition, what's a better way to make your readers read the summary than to force them into feeling like they're looking at an interpretive essay question?
I can think of several.
Now, despite what I call it, it's not actually a matter of every light novel title. There are short-titled LN adaptations, and there are shows not sourced from light novels with equally lengthy titles to the contemporaries. It's just a means to get the general idea across that the makers really want to flaunt their creative writer credits.
They aren't the prettiest or the most consistent, but you gotta hand it to them. They know how to grab your attention. For as many jokes as we can make about them, they pop out. You'll see articles, memes, and general discussion on how absurd they can be alongside the information they give you. Frankly, why don't more media try elongating their titles? Like, last summer me and my buddies fought against a serial-killing man-eating shark. When I met the eccentric millionaire, he threw once-in-a-lifetime ragers. Or, my 25th banger, rocking the 18th century. They're called movements for what'll happen to your britches after listening to them. Just off the top of my head.
Sometimes they'll be rightfully abbreviated like GATE or Konosuba, but in general, the defining point is what comes after, as the continued titling does maintain the identity of attention-grabbing sum-up. I suppose the main con to it all is that it's more focused on telling the plot rather than accentuating the feeling or spotlighting a perspective. It's not really all that bad, as at the end of the day, you either watch it or you don't. But you do have that advantage with it to know right out what you may get yourself into, rather than having a small dance around the mental gymnastics of interpreting whatever the hell Handshakers is.
I'm never getting those 6 hours back. And then there are titles that don't quite fit into these categories. They either expand into multiple classifications or don't succinctly fit into one criteria or another. For the latter instances, these are either the most interpretive or the simplest, depending on your reasoning, the way you look at it, or the general say-so of the authors or creators.
A series like the Monogatari series is a good example of this, as each tale can be interpreted with a different attitude and idea, as the audience can expect more unexpected nonsense from it.
Okay, but where does Medaka Box fit into this timeline?
Then there are situations where the title is cryptic, like Welcome to the NHK, or titles where both the generalized version or the expanded one are acceptable, like Hanebado. Titles with 2 official translations, like Working, or titles that, I'll be honest, I don't know how to explain, like Bleach,
It's probably a reference to the thing you drink after you figure everything out.
or What the Hell is the Fate series.
Boy, isn't that a question.
Well, no matter what the meaning, the expression of evoking ideas, emotions, viewpoints, and even whole stories through titles is quite an underrated art form. I'll admit, I don't think about anime titles 24/7, but when I do, I like to find out what influence they have on the shows or the meanings behind the conception. They have weighted practicality, or in some cases, lack thereof, because they're the first thing to acknowledge about the anime. It gives a name to help brand itself as its own thing, and even with the worst rated anime, still hold true to the fact that they'll own up to the namesake and the reputation that follows. From the unusual, to the simple, to the lengthy, to those that start a character as a way to tell their story, anime titles are labels that stick with their respective properties forever, so the process and the artful purpose of them are thought out, substantive, and probably most importantly, recognizable.
Anime titles are enigmatic. They can tell a whole story with one word or a whole paragraph. They realize their author's ambitions through the way they convey their presence, and sometimes the memorability is just as important as the content within them. Of course, they can be pretty out there, but that's part of the charm of it. And overall, they assure their place as a piece the only way they can, as a unique status and marketability. But now, if you'll excuse me, I think I'm finally close to getting this Wombat name right. Learning from titles really helped me get a grasp on what I really wanted to express. They're like the racehorses of the animal kingdom.